Well, it's been 3 months since installing the 3.5-inch Metalcloak Gamechanger on our 2021 Gladiator Mojave. And so far we've done 20 different trails across 3 different states. We've got a few things to say about it. Like, is it worth it? 100%. But there's a few things to know and a couple recommendations that you'll want to stick around to the end to hear about. So the lift has performed very well. I mean, from a 10,000 foot view, it's a much better ride than what we had on there previously.
And that was the...
That was the spacer. We ended up having an 1.5 inch spacer, and we kept the OEM Fox shocks. We did quite a few trails in that thing, but we didn't have the right amount of clearance.
For what we ended up doing.
Right, and we kept running into issues with, flexing out those OEM Fox shocks because they have a very short stroke on them, only at 8 inches. So we put this lift on and it was like night and day. Mm-hmm. We're finally able to keep up with the people in front of us. It's a very cushy, very pillowy ride. Mm-hmm. I don't know how else to explain that, but it's way better than what it was before.
Very different.
But it didn't start off that way. The Metalcloak Gamechanger was not advertised to work on the Gladiator Mojave.
Right.
Well, at first it was. They changed the size of the coils and then they no longer fit into the top coil isolator. So we had the lift done at a place in Arizona. Mm-hmm. I knew going into this that it didn't fit, but they said on 3 different occasions that it's not an issue.
Right. We can make it work.
We've done this before on a Gladiator Mojave.
Right.
It turns out that they haven't done a Rocksport long travel shock plus the Gamechanger lift on a Gladiator Mojave. We immediately had issues with this thing.
Right.
The spring was bowing, the coils were coming out of their perches, they were rubbing up against the frame.
And the shock.
The noises that this thing would make. And so, we got this lift done and then we gave it a week so we could have time to tweak it before Trail Hero. That was the first big event. So we took it to Trail Hero and it would just make so much noise. The company that did the lift, they did try to work with it. They tried to push the axle forward a little bit.
And it got to a point where, they kind of had to throw up their hands. They didn't have any other answers.
Right.
They did as much as they knew how to do for our specific situation.
Right.
And it wasn't enough. It wasn't cutting it.
Yeah, nothing that they could do was going to fix this. Mm-hmm. What it took was a newly designed coil isolator for the Gladiator Mojave. I called Metalcloak, talked to Will. It turns out that they were working already on the top coil isolators for the Gladiator Mojave specifically. So almost 3 months later, we finally had the top coil isolators put in and the issue was put to rest. Mm-hmm. No more bowing of the springs, no more noises. It rode completely different.
It did.
I mean, not unsurprisingly.
Did they have to adjust the caster?
They did adjust the caster. So they moved it up to, I think, 6.5, somewhere in there. And they adjusted, the toe out was 0.4 and it should be like 0.1.
Because we had been having a lot of problems with the steering.
Right. It just wasn't, the drivability wasn't the best as it could be. And your dad even got in and he even mentioned something. So that's why I was like, okay, there's something that's just not, it could be better. But when you drive it so much, you just kind of get used to it. But after going to Core Off-Road here in Colorado, they fixed it up and it has been performing very well.
It has.
The coils are nice and straight, mostly. There is still a bow on the passenger. Slight, but I'm told that is going to be considered normal. This is what I've read as well. So why Metalcloak? It was a toss-up between Metalcloak and Clayton Off-Road. I mean, Clayton Off-Road I read was more for overlanding. We were finding ourselves doing more rock crawling stuff, and it seemed like Metalcloak was just the go-to lift for that. And then especially when you pair them with the Rocksport long travel shocks, you get 13 inches of travel out of those shocks, and it has been great.
And it just looks cool.
It does look cool. There's an incredible amount of flex in there. And yeah, the gold zinc plated stuff, it looks really nice up underneath there.
Yeah.
So, and we've had no issues other than the original upper coil isolator.
Right. Yeah. Once we got the other parts from Metalcloak, and then once Core Off-Road went in there and worked their magic, tweaked a few more things, it's really, we were out on some trails last weekend and we got to a spot with some articulation. They weren't even like whoops. It was, like each tire was going and it felt floaty.
It did feel floaty.
It was finally like everything was coming together.
Right.
And working together the way that it was meant to.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a lot of the reason why we went with the Rocksports, because they are valved for the specific spring rate of these coils on Metalcloak. So a lot of people will just leave their default Fox shocks on there. There's nothing wrong with that, but you're not going to benefit from that coil length at all because you're going to be restricted from the travel on your shocks, which is 8 inches, and that's not a lot at all when it comes to rock crawling. If you need that length and that articulation.
Right. You know, and it all comes down to how you are using your vehicle.
Right.
Because it's not just the rock crawling. We found that with these Rocksport shocks, it's awful in the sand.
Yes.
So you have to figure out how you're going to use your vehicle and what's going to check the most boxes for you.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, at the end of the day, the Rocksports, they're monotube. Like she said, they are not great on the sand. It will jolt your face and you feel like your teeth are going to fall straight out.
It was pretty rough.
Metalcloak is reportedly working on this. You know, I found a video from, I forgot his name, KC250. It was back in April this year, and the owner of Metalcloak was showing these new long travel remote reservoir shocks. And I think that is going to be a complete, I was going to say game changer, but don't get confused about it. But just to pair the long travel with something that can be heating up without spending $5,000 on a pair of Fox 2.5 DSCs, that's going to be incredible. So we don't know when they're going to come out, sometime next year. So,
but we're watching.
For sure. So why didn't we just get a Sport? We covered this in a video. You'll have to go click back on that and put a link up on top. But essentially, we just didn't know any better.
We didn't know.
We needed something to tow behind the RV. That's what they had in the lot. She sat in it. She formed a big smile, and I knew it was game over. So we ended up with the Mojave. Looking back on it, we probably would have gotten a Sport and built it up. But I'm still happy with what we have because it's completely unique. It'll just be our little Mohavicon. Why not 2.5 inch? 2.5 is just not enough.
Right.
We rub our inner fenders even on 3.5. When we pushed our axle forward, we were popping the end of our stock bumper on 3.5. So I think 3.5 on 37s is like a perfect combination.
Yeah.
We've ridden trails across 5, 6, 7, 8 different states, all different types of environments, and it seems like it's a nice balance between clearance and maintaining somewhat of a low center of gravity. Yeah,
because, you know, the higher you get, it's going to throw other things off, so you have to find a happy medium. Right, exactly.
So with the 3.5 inch, Metalcloak does recommend upgrading your front drive axle shaft. We did just that. We went with Adams. We don't want to cut corners on anything that we do. They recommend, because of the articulation, to keep the pinion angle happy, to get an aftermarket drive shaft, so we did just that. You know, you got also Tom Woods is another great manufacturer of drive shafts, but we went with Adams based on the shop recommendation. So far we've been happy. You do have to keep that re-greased every 3,000 or so miles, but as long as you keep that happy, then you should be in good shape. Why not Metalcloak steering? It's steel, and the shop sold us on this 7075 aluminum by Fusion 4x4. There's no regrets in this. I think we've already landed on it once or twice. Fusion 4x4 offers a lifetime no BS warranty. It's that same type of material that they use in King of the Hammers and all their steering components. The stuff is made to bend and kind of just bend back if you were to whack a rock with it. So we've had zero issues with that, and everything has been pretty well. We've not, up until now, knocked on wood, no death wobble, no bumps here, no issues with anything. Everything is just kind of fine-tuned. So yeah, on the trail, we talked a little bit about that already. It's very cushy, very pillowy, very soft ride. It's almost unfair when I see others jolting around, and there's still the ways that we can make it better. You know, we talked about the couple things to keep in mind. One of those is you'll have to fine-tune the amount of bump stops that you'll need in the back and in the front. So we started with 3, we ended up with 2, because with 3, you still had a couple of inches left above travel before that shock fully compresses. We ended up tweaking a little bit. There are now 2 in there. We can go up further. However, now there's an issue where the sway bar is starting to contact the spare tire. The sway link is also starting to rub up against the bolts that hold on the Metalcloak back diff cover. So there's now 2 issues going on in the back that they're not really issues, just 2 little things to tweak in the back that will gain us a little bit more up travel. So one of the recommendations is to remove the diff cover, which I'm not a big fan of because it makes me feel better that there's so much protection up underneath there.
Yeah.
But the guys at Core were saying, you know, just get a good quality diff cover to put on there. But I've just seen those things split on the trail, and people were down there just with a hammer trying to seal it back up on the trail because they were different leak fluid. They were leaking They were leaking diff fluid on the trail. One option is to probably go with anti-rock on the rear sway. That way we can kind of eliminate that issue altogether. That's something that we probably will end up doing in the future. So because the rear sway bar is now starting to possibly contact that spare tire, the spare tire has got to be removed. So that's one thing we're going to be doing moving forward. Another big recommendation that I have, another upgrade that we're going to be doing, is moving to a triangulated 4-link setup in the rear. That will remove the suspension binding and make the ride in the back a lot more comfortable, especially for the kids that are constantly back there. It'll also allow us to remove that rear track bar, which sets us up for some bigger improvements in the future that we don't want to talk about quite yet. I don't think Metalcloak makes anything like this. I looked on their site just before recording this video to make sure. That triangulated 4-link setup is made by Rockcrawler. If we had to do the lift thing all over again, I would have been interested to see more Rockcrawler setups. We're happy with the Metalcloak lift. Yeah. But it just goes to show that you can never do too much research on these lifts. I did months and months and months and months of research and reading on Gladiator forums and YouTube and Facebook groups. Nobody ever mentioned that triangulated 4-link setup. So it was just interesting to have that pitched to us so far down the road.
Right.
And it just goes to show that you're just never done upgrading these things. Another lesson that we learned with this is this lift it's not a one and done thing. You're not going to put it on and then walk away and then never have to touch it again. There's constant maintenance.
Right.
You're always looking down there to make sure that things aren't moved out of place. You should have some paint on each of your jam nuts and all your marks to make sure things aren't moving. We had to have it tweaked a couple times. We knocked the steering loose and stand hollow, so we had to have the drag link moved back. There's another time it knocked it loose again, but the drag link wasn't moved, but there were some just further tweaks and adjustments that they had to make the ride and to make everything just ride better.
Yeah. I
think it rides comfortable on the freeway.
Yeah, I think so too. It's a Jeep. It's not, super cushy to begin with, but it's comfortable. I
don't remember any distinct differences from stock. Probably quieter, of course, because we run mud terrains, but you still drive with like 2 fingers. I mean, it's very easy to drive that thing. So yeah, we've had no issues, and overall we're pretty happy. So that wraps it up. I think we've covered just about everything here. If you have any questions or comments, let us know below, and we will see you on the next episode.